The patient's not going to talk back to you. I call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, November 10th, and the time is 6 p.m. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the district website as soon as possible. Welcome members of our community here tonight to observe the important work being done on behalf of all school district stakeholders. Okay, Dr. Hillman, we have some items in the table file. Please update us.
Yes, we have several items in the table file this evening, mostly on the consent agenda. There are personnel items, including appointments, increase, decrease, change in assignment, a leave of absence, some resignations, and there's also the winter spring instructor list for the community education programs. In addition, we have an updated enrollment options and history report that includes the October 1 data from each of the years included in the report. And then we also have the enrollment report that was not prepared at the time of publication of the board packet. So that is what we have for this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no objections, we will add these items to the agenda as we move forward. Okay. Is there a motion to accept the agenda as presented?
Motion.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Second? Second. Thank you, Amy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Do we have anybody signed up for public comment? Okay, that is item 3. Item 4 is our announcements and recognitions. Alan.
Yes, we have several announcements this evening. The first one is one that I think could be a first in Northfield School District history, to the best of my knowledge, which is I want to congratulate school board member Amy Gerwitz, who has been named one of the Minnesota School Boards Association all-state school board selections. And so selection is based on a board member's exemplary leadership, service, and commitment to advancing public education. The annual award is given to a select group. I believe it's a total of 7 board members from across the state. And that will be recognized at the School Boards Association's January annual conference. So please join me in congratulating Amy Gerwitz for this auspicious honor.
Congratulations, Amy. Well earned.
And we just learned about this late last week, so you'll hear more about it as we in the run up to the conference in January. So congratulations again, Amy. Well deserved. We also have several other recognitions. We want to congratulate the Raider boys soccer team, who tied for 3rd place in the state tournament on October 29th. What a great run for the Raider soccer squad this fall. And a great run also for the girls cross country team, who placed 3rd at the state meet on Saturday, November 2nd. That was quite exciting. Boys also participated. They did not place in the top 3, but they had a great run as well. So congratulations to our cross country teams. I had a chance to watch the fall play last weekend and want to just really encourage board members and other interested members of the community to see this year's performance of Sense and Sensibility. It continues this weekend. There are performances at 7:30 on Friday and Saturday, and there's also a matinee at 2 o'clock on Sunday. Just really a well-produced show, very enjoyable dialogue, having just so impressed with our student actors and actresses who just really did very well with a very deep show. And it's funny as well. That wry wit from Jane Austen, it was really well done. I want people to know that we started celebrating Veterans Day across the district today. So today, Greenville Park held their Veterans Day program. Tomorrow, the middle school will host their program beginning at 2 p.m. There's going to be some musical performances, some speeches from community members and area veterans. People are invited to attend. It's also going to be streamed on Northfield Live. So if you're unable to attend, you can view it on Northfield Live. We also have Bridgewater's program tomorrow at 9 a.m. And then Spring Creek finishes it up on Wednesday. There's a veterans lunch that has been really well received by our local veteran community over the last few years. So we celebrate Veterans Day throughout this week. Want to thank those who have served such an important thing in the service of our democracy. And we try to show that appreciation through multiple events this week. Those are your announcements for this evening.
Thank you very much. Board members, do you have any recognitions or announcements at this time? Okay, Ben.
I know there's a lot going on, but I just add in too that the boys football team finished second in the section too. They lost to Mayo a couple weekends ago, but tack that one on as well.
Anyone else? We will go on to our items for discussion and reports. And first up, we have ALC Director Daryl Keller summarizing the 24-25 Comprehensive Achievement and Civic Readiness and Achievement and Integration Results. Welcome, Daryl.
Thank you. So I am Daryl Keller. I have already presented you the 3 PowerPoint slides, but if you have any questions at this time, I'll take them.
Very good. Board members, comments or questions? Okay, Amy and Jeff, you also have one? Okay, Amy and then Jeff. Great, Jeff.
Mine's pretty short. Thanks for your presentation. I was just curious, you said you were going to talk to, the part of it was when you ask, you went from asking with the 8th grade what they wanted to do when they grow up kind of thing and do it to 11th grade. You're switching to 11th. My thought would be, it'd be kind of neat if you asked them in 8th grade and asked them in 11th grade.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that would be my only suggestion.
Yeah. Oh, that is a good suggestion. It would be a multi-year.
Yeah. Well, then you
data.
say, it's like,
Yep.
you realize in 8th grade, here's what did you say? And then in 11th grade, they can change your mind. But I thought that was interesting. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna call on Corey and then Amy. Okay.
Thanks, Daryl. One question for you. I think it was during the 25-26 goals. Actually, it is. I'm looking at it. You had mentioned the kindergarten starting points and the half-point growth per week between the fall and the spring testing or assessments. I'm just curious if you know how many weeks there are. Is it like looking at a 12% growth for points?
I don't know off the top of my head what the total percent growth is, but we did look at the targeted growth. So in the program, they have targeted growth, and the targeted growth for the program, like prediction, it would be at or slightly above that. So it was within that growth rate of what the program would suggest or have for them as a
Probably somewhere between 12 and 15%.
Yeah.
Fall to spring, we can do the weeks, right? So,
Yep.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Just wanted a little more context than just the half point.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Amy.
So, Daryl, I had several comments and questions. My first is sort of a general congratulations because there was a lot of great improvement on a lot of different fronts in the last year. And even as you noted, we didn't make all of the goals. We made substantial progress toward them. So congratulations on that. That's exciting news.
Thank you.
So a couple of questions. When we talked about graduation rates, and I know the state likes the 4-year graduation rate, but then you tried to give us more detail, and I started doing the numbers of 25% and then 30% and then 27% adds up to 82%, which means if I'm doing my addition right, 18% of the 44 students dropped out?
Uh,
And do we track dropped out? And because to me, dropping out, maybe that's the wrong, incorrect term these days, but that to me is the most important number.
Right. And I do believe, so of those percentages, it was a little smaller than 18% dropped out, but there was some that dropped out. And so the tricky part with that is that um, sometimes we know that they dropped out when GED, sometimes they moved and we just don't know kind of whatever happened to that student. And so there is a little bit of ambiguity in those numbers because sometimes they unenroll from our program and we're not quite sure if they finished somewhere else, like at some later time or date. And so, but for the most part, it was that there were some students that dropped out. We did account for a couple of them went GED to get their GED. And so we accounted for that, but there were a couple that just dropped out of school altogether.
And that's just something that would be interesting to sort of know, like a 6-year graduation rate, or since you're tracking those people, I worry about sort of, the class of 2024, but then you're throwing in the people who are sort of on track, but still taking extra years, but they're actually from earlier classes. So I'm just wondering, as you're thinking forward, if there's any way we could have sort of like a 4-year graduation rate and then a 6-year graduation rate, or something like that. At what point does it make sense to measure that again?
Yep. Yeah. So we do for the ALC, I keep track of the 4, 5, 6, 7-year graduation rates. So I look at all those rates, and the 7-year rate essentially is when they age out of public education. And so I keep track of those graduation rates past the 4-year. But yeah, that's the intent of this, of Northfield Forward. The feedback that we got was to be more mindful of that 5, 6, 7-year graduation rate as opposed to just the 4. We don't want to get rid of the 4 because that's obviously important, but just to kind of extend that net of paying attention to exactly what you're saying, to those 5, 6, 7-year graduation rates as well.
And I'm glad you're there doing it, because I know you're really good at motivating those students and keeping them on track and getting them to graduate.
Thank you.
I have a few more questions, if that's okay. So you talk about every student improving their attendance, and I know you're still figuring out what that means, but I worry a little bit that we already have students who are actually attending by far most of the time, and what if they get, sick and they're gone for a week?
Yep.
And that for them is a huge time to be away, because they're usually one of those kids who's never sick, or only sick for a day or two a year.
Yep.
So I'm not sure how you're going to handle that at the top end, where kids are already really good about attending.
Yep, and that's partly where we have the 2-part. And so the first part is they're at 90% attendance rate. So that gives them a little bit of leeway to miss. And so those students that are typically at 90% or above, which is the state's definition of consistent attendance, they would still fall in that bucket. Because if they're at 100% attendance rate, which we do have some that have perfect attendance, there is no way to improve their attendance. And so we wanted to have the 2 different ways to measure. So if they're at 90%, that's the first step of the goal, or first way to meet that goal. But the other part that every student is, so then we look at every single student, not all students, but every single student individually, to see if they did improve their attendance. So you kind of have 2 parts to that goal to try and capture that exact, but also the opposite
The second
end too.
part is more for the students who are still working toward perfect attendance.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Then my third question is just, I want to understand about the dyslexia piece. I think it's great that we're looking to identify dyslexia as early as possible, but my question is, can we actually correct dyslexia if it's identified early? Is that what we're headed for, or is it just identification and working with them?
So this, I will admit, is not my strong suit, but from my understanding, it is. So if you have the benchmarks and you have the reading strategies put in place and extra support for those students, that you can minimize that, you can improve the achievement of those students with dyslexia and quicker than if you were to not have that extra support. So you kind of mitigate the dyslexia if you get it to it early, from my understanding.
Add something?
And I think part of that is that's a fairly recent requirement for school districts to screen for dyslexia. And the component is early identification. And so it isn't that that they are demonstrating, I believe the term is characteristics of dyslexia. And so it is about early detection, ongoing intervention and support in a variety of different methods to help students become strong readers as they move through. So it is about early detection, making sure the students have the early intervention that is needed in order to improve their ability to be reading at grade level, especially by third grade.
It all sounds great. So
Well, it sounds great. It's a tremendous amount of work, right? So I mean, we have some really good systems in place, and I think it is a stretch goal that you're seeing this year because we did not screen, everyone for some time for this particular piece. And now that we're being more intentional about it, we are able to identify more students who would fall into that particular category. We've screened for lots of other things in the past, right? But we're getting very focused on this component as a result of the legislation. So again, it's about all the things that we've ever heard, with early childhood, academic related issues, early intervention, targeted intervention and instruction in order to help students be able to reach those benchmarks, especially by grade 3.
thank you, Matt. And thank you again, Daryl, for all your great work in this area.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else, question or comment? You haven't been?
Just a quick question. Thanks, Daryl. And yeah, thanks for taking the lead and presenting this information this evening.
Yeah.
I was just curious, kind of what does that goal setting process look like from overall, just as far as the district approaches that? Because we do get kind of specific, we go like 31 and 9%,
Right.
It feels like how are we choosing those numbers? So can you kind of walk us through what that looks like?
Yep. So the goal setting process starts with, so Carrie Duba and I, it was Hope before me, looks at kind of the areas of need of the district, generally speaking, and also looking at the data of where the areas of need through the data are. And so we take that first broad stroke through the data just to see what areas we could show some improvement on. And so we go through that and comb through what we feel is the areas of need. And then we will take it, so like the CACR goals are very much connected to community and engagement. And so we take those thoughts that we have of like, here's some goals that we think are needed for the district or would be beneficial. And then we get the feedback from that community group to see what their thoughts are. We both do also talk with, I've talked with other leaders in the district to bounce ideas off of them of like, what do you think of this goal? What's goal area would you like to see focused on? And so we go through a collaborative process of stakeholders in the district, but then also bringing in the community members to get their input too from the direction that we're going with the goals. And then as we drill down into the specifics that you're mentioning, like the specific details of the goals, that is more up to like where we're looking at with data. And then also kind of some of those stretch goals, to Dr. Hillman's point, if we have strong systems in place, then we feel like we can make some of those stretch goals and kind of challenge ourselves to some of those. And so it's kind of the more the stretch goal, the more confidence we have in the systems that have been put in place, whether that's curriculum or staffing, PD, whatever it may be. And so that's partly how we determine like, what do we think is a reasonable, all of these goals for MDE's requirements have to be SMART goals. So we have to put that in that realistic, what do we think is a stretch goal that we can actually achieve?
Anyone else? Question, comment? Daryl, I have one item in that 25-26 report, the goal number 2,
Yep.
and using attendance.
Yes.
Oh, I thought you were gonna.
Would you like me to bring it up here?
It doesn't matter to me, but
Okay.
so my question is, the previous year, under the same goal with the same title, racial and economic achievement gaps between students are closed. And so the previous goal very specifically is bringing in race and economic achievement. In 25-26, the feedback you got from Northfield Forward membership
Yep.
is that they wanted to change it to every student will improve their attendance. So my question has to do with how will you know if certain groups are needing intervention, are meeting goals? You talked about, okay, so the average are going to have obviously some.
Yep. And so basically, we're going to be doing the same thing that we did for the 24-25 results. So the word, how we're looking at it through that feedback, the concern was they didn't want to have free and reduced students of color specifically called out for attendance rates. And so what we wanted to do is capture that essence through this goal question of every student, but then we'll still look at those subgroups, but just not call them out directly in the goal, if that makes sense. And so we'll still look to make sure every student indicating that they're going to be in, like every student has subgroups that they're going to be a part of, whether that's special education or ethnicity or economic status, whatever it may be. So we'll look at all those subgroups in that word every, to look at each specific student to see where they're at, if that makes sense. So it's like, it's still getting to those subgroups, but it's not calling them out directly, is the thought.
And I appreciate not calling a specific group out. I really do appreciate that part. I just thinking if this presentation, I've seen it a couple of years now, has a very similar format over the years. And so how will you, you'll be able to report met goal, 90% of every student improve their attendance. And I'm interested to hear how you will target helping, intervening, understanding that certain groups of students are having, different challenges for meeting attendance.
Yep, for sure.
Report on that.
And right now, I don't know the answer to that question, but I did talk with Dr. Hillman at the break of adding some graphics to the results, which I didn't have many of this time. And I think I can be pretty creative with capturing some graphics that don't call out things, but also get to the point of showing specifics.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Daryl.
Yeah.
Claudia, I think it's important. We can still disaggregate that data right
sure.
toward that point. And so I think what you're asking, how are we going to report and make sure that we are continuing to
student.
intervene? And I think you've heard our previous attendance presentations by our attendance team at the high school and throughout the system, as a matter of fact. And they are going to still disaggregate the data, right? They are still going to do the kinds of things that they have been doing to be successful with demographic segments that have shown that they need more intensive support in the past. This is about that overall goal, but we'll still be able to report it and disaggregate the data in that same very nuanced way that we have done in the past.
Yeah, no, it's important to know who needs additional supports. So,
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Question, comment? Ben?
I'll just follow up on that to say that I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, but attendance is obviously monitoring that and sort of responding in real time is a high priority, right? So this is
Yes.
very much an iterative process in which you're looking at.
Yeah, we have some
those-
real-time data dashboards in which we
Right.
can disaggregate that data. It's looked at weekly.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I
In
think-
some cases daily.
True.
yeah. Right. Because the underlying, just to assume, that in certain groups, the underlying sort of root cause of what might be driving lower attendance is going to change over time.
Right. Yep. Yeah, it's very much on the radar of all schools. Attendance is, there's not too many educators that don't believe if to learn you have to be in the building to make that happen. So yeah, attendance is very much on the forefront of everyone.
Thank you, Daryl.
Yep.
Oh, Jeff, yes.
I have one more question I probably should ask, otherwise I'll forget. I do run from time to time, run into people that, dropped out of high school or whatever else. It's kind of like my sense in it, because I, obviously believe in education and I'd like to, whatever their feeling is, whatever happened, I'd kind of like to re-engage them
Mhm.
and say, do you have an interest in getting your GED or whatever else? So, of the people that you mentioned, people that have just quit or whatever, how do we encourage them or however to get them back and allow them to finish a GED? So what can I say to people
Yep.
from your perspective?
So from my perspective, what I'd really like to do and encourage others to do is to talk with someone, talk through a plan. So if they are under 21, they can come talk to the ALC. We talk to people's like all the time about what's your plan, how do you want to get there, and so develop a plan of whether that is GED, diploma, whatever that may be. So for sure, welcome them to the ALC to talk through that, what their goals are for future life and education. But you can also point them to adult basic education and talk through that with their staff too. If they're thinking of GED, they're not quite sure. They have a lot of kind of pre-tests that you can take just to see how you do. They can talk through it and see what that entails for them. So I would encourage them to seek out that resource and just talk through it. Like it's no pressure. It just gives them an idea of what that may look like in whatever kind of depending on their age, what that.
And how
situation.
long do we, as a school district, claim them as they graduated from the Northfield school system? If they finished through us, so to speak, or any,
Yep.
what is the law on that?
So most of it is 4-year plan or 4-year rate. Pretty much only is a lot of the metrics that are used is just the 4-year rate. I do keep track, as I said before, of 5, 6, 7-year rates. And so I have all those and I keep track of those because for me, I have a little bit different focus than the 4-year rate. Mine is to have students just graduate. And so I want to make sure by the time they, before they age out of public education, that they hopefully will have graduated. And so I keep track of that more longitudinal data. But to my understanding, and maybe Dr. Hillman knows, but most everything is 4-year rate, reported on 4-year rate only.
But Jeff, I think I hear your question a little differently. I think you're hearing, how long can someone keep coming back and secure a Northfield High School diploma? Is that what I'm hearing your
Well,
question?
yeah, even through, other measures, just how long do we, because if they didn't finish or they dropped out of school, and what I'm thinking is if I came through and did some kind of program that through Northfield that up till I'm 21, I could be credited. Because I mean,
Mhm.
face it, when you go meet people, you say, well, where'd you go to school? And a lot of people are like, well, I dropped out of school. But if you said, well, I did finish my GED or whatever it was, and they did that before they're 21. So, well, I mean, I would say if that would have been Northfield or wherever else, that's kind of what the question that I'm asking. So I'd like to know for clarity what that looks like.
Yeah, and I think Daryl, first I'd like to just clarify that I think actually if we look at the data around the number of students who drop out in Minnesota, it's actually fairly low overall, right? And I think it's partially because of the continued services and opportunities that are offered for students. So Daryl, I think really what the question is, so when students come back to let's say that they have left school for a bit and they come back and they go to the ALC, the first question is gonna be how old are you, right? The second part is how many credits do you have remaining? So there sometimes is a math problem about, okay, you need X amount of credits to be able to graduate. The first and primary goal would be to have students be able to meet the graduation requirements of the Northfield School District. And so even students who are on that 7-year graduation rate can still receive a diploma. Then there does become a calculated decision about when it's better to shift to adult basic education and GED work. And so Daryl, why don't you talk a little bit different about that difference about, let's say you have a 19-year-old who's been out of school for a couple of years. They're coming into you to say, hey, I want to make sure I get my degree. Walk through how you would coach that student to determine, are they in a diploma program, which the diploma program would be, Jeff, getting a Northfield High School diploma, right? Because they would meet the board's requirements for graduation, or the calculus where you say, okay, in this circumstance, it may be better to partner with the GED, which of course we host our GED classes at Greenville, at the old Greenville Park, the Northfield Community Education Center, have a great program there that's partnered with a couple of other school districts as well.
Yep. Yeah. So that's exactly what we do. So depending on the age of the student, the credits that they have obtained so far, we do have quite a healthy, kind of robust credit recovery system at the ALC, but also the high schools also has some. And so we can get credits for students much quicker than at the high school just because of our credit recovery and our structure of our program. And so it depends on where they're at with age and how many credits they have left. But basically, if we normally have a general idea of the time frame, if you have this many credits, it'll take about this long. And then we talk through that with them to say, if you just are doing this program, it'll take you this long. If you're able to do this and this, it'll take this long, and kind of walk through that with them pretty detailed of like, if things go well, you should be able to do it in this amount of time. If they are getting close to that age out limit, then we have the honest conversation to say, well, our program, even if we do this and this and this, will take you 2.5 years and you only have 1 year left. So you may want to, instead of trying ours, you may want to go and investigate the GED just to see if could be quicker for you. So we do coach people based on kind of what the best circumstances for them is.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yep.
Daryl, anyone else? All right, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
All right, item B, Director of Special Services Sarah Pratt will review the recently updated Total Special Education System TSES plan for the Northfield Public School District. The plan outlines how Northfield Public Schools identifies, evaluates, and serves students with disabilities. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me tonight. I'm here to just present some of the work that we've been doing in our department and updating kind of our owner's manual, if you will, about how we run special education systems in the Northfield Public Schools. And what's lovingly referred to as the TSIS, because in special education we love our acronyms. And so this is something that is required by the State Department. And several years ago, it was the legislation was updated to just really call out the required components. And so that's what we were updating and making sure that we have all the required components with the most current information for the Northfield schools. And of course, we ground all of our work in our strategic plan and our vision. And when I look at the strategic commitments, I really think this aligns to our equity and our communication. Bless you. As we move forward and sharing the information and the work that we're doing in a formal way. And as Claudia mentioned in the introduction, the Total Special Ed System Manual, or the TSIS, really just outlines how we do our special education work in the district. It outlines how we identify, evaluate, and serve students with disabilities, which is really the gist of what we do. It also ensures compliance with the state and federal laws, and it guides our services across all grade levels from birth through age 22. The key components of the TSIS, as required by legislation, include the child study procedures, the identification and evaluation, how we provide those services, how we administer and manage the services, any interagency agreements that we have, and then our Special Ed Advisory Council partnership or structure and functioning. And so the Child Find and Identification System, as I mentioned, we do birth through age 22, and through the birth through age 2, we prioritize, and we have an early intervention services and Child Find. Ages 3 through 6, children can qualify for special education services under the categorical disability of developmental delay or specific categorical disabilities, which I believe there are 12 others. And then from what we call school age, more school age, ages 7 through 22, the developmental delay is no longer a disability category that children can qualify under. And so they do have to meet one of the categorical disabilities, such as learning disabilities, other health disabilities, blind, visually impaired, deaf and hard of hearing, all of those other ones in a specific category. And we are required to have identification systems in place for students who participate in public schools, in our non-public schools, students who are not attending school, homeschool services. We have child outreach, primarily in our birth to age 2. We have the Help Me Grow system, and then we work with a number of health providers, daycare providers, child care systems in the district, in the community, to share information about our early intervention resources and work closely with them to outreach and let them know what we have available. And then we just have the screening and referral procedures, the early childhood screening and the screenings within our schools. One of the required components is to identify how we as a district identify students with specific learning disabilities. There are 2 different ways to do that according to the state legislature, and one is through the discrepancy model, and the other is through a system of scientifically research-based interventions, the response to intervention model, if you will. And in Northfield, we currently continue to use the discrepancy model, and so we have to identify that. We are working towards the scientific research-based intervention eligibility area, and we are well on our way to having a very structured system of interventions that we are going to be able to utilize for that in the future should we need to. So. And then to identify some of the service delivery methods, we provide services across all continuums. We provide special education services in special education settings. We provide services in general education settings with more of a push-in or a consultation model. And then we have recently begun more co-teaching across grade levels. And that's a super exciting service delivery model expansion that we've been doing. And then we also have all of the consultation related services, speech, OT, PT, school psychology services, social work, and adaptive phy ed. Oh, going back to this one. Oops, I went too far ahead. Hold on. I also want to mention in the direct specialized instruction in the birth through age 2 services, we provide services in a child's home or in their child care setting as well. Oops, now I got stuck. And I don't have my reading glasses. And again, we provide special education services at all sites, ALC, high school, middle school, all of the elementaries, and our Northfield Community Education Center. We also have our partnership with the Cannon Valley Special Education Cooperative for Setting 4 programs that provide services for students with social emotional behavioral needs, our 18 to 22-year-old programming. We provide services to students who are homebound and unable to enter a school to receive special education services, or students who we place on home-based services for a variety of reasons if they are not able to successfully access a school environment. And then we also provide services to all of our non-public students. And this is the leadership team, myself, Caleb Davidson, our assistant director, and Andrea Robbins, our early childhood special education coordinator. We have interagency collaboration with the Cannon Valley Special Ed Co-op, as I mentioned. And we are one of 4 member districts with Faribault, Medford, and Owatonna as well. And then the last component was our Special Ed Advisory Council. The purpose and the composition, it is required, and it is intended to increase parent involvement in district policymaking and feedback. Part of a unique structure to the Special Ed Advisory Council is we have to have at least 50% of the membership has to be parents of students with disabilities. And so that's pretty exciting to have parents come in, and we try to get a variety of parents with elementary, secondary, early childhood. So we get a variety of perspectives. And then also district staff and community members as well. Non-public school representation, we are still working with St. Dominic's to identify a member for that criteria. And then we meet 3 times annually along with some of the other district committees. We may or may not provide recommendations if there are any that come out of that work to the school board. We have not yet. And then we just review the district special ed policies and programs through that process. And then that's kind of the gist of the whole thesis, but I just think our strengths are that we have a comprehensive child find system, we have a timely evaluation process, full range of service options that we've been really actively working on improving over the years. We have an active parent advisory council, and then we are going to, as I mentioned, it had been a little bit since we had reviewed this, we're going to do this annually, continue to improve our SEEK engagement, and increase our staff development and our program evaluation on a regular basis. So those are the key components. Any questions?
Thank you, Sarah. Board members, do you have any questions or comments? Okay, Amy, anyone else? Go ahead, Amy, and then Ben.
Sarah, thanks for coming and speaking with us tonight. And it's interesting to see this whole process. And I have been lucky enough to be part of the SevSec board for a number of years and have some insight that way too. So thank you for all you do for our special ed students. I have a few questions about numbers for
Yes.
you. So questions like, how many special ed students do we have in the district, and what percentage of the student population do you touch with your services?
So December 1st child count is kind of our number that we use on a yearly basis. So we are not quite to December 1st this year. I would assume we've gone up a little bit, but last year our numbers were 747 students. And so it equates to 18 to 19% of the population, I believe. And that population is a little bit higher. The percentages are a little bit higher at the elementary level. I think one of the phenomena there that impacts the higher percentages are the students who receive speech and language services as part of kind of a developmental progression of speech sound errors, and that they tend to graduate or make the progress and are not receiving those services as much in middle school and high school. So there's a little bit higher percentage at the elementary levels, I would say in the 20s to low 20s. And then our percentages at the secondary levels are a little bit lower.
It's great. In fact, I know for decades, Northfield special education has had an excellent reputation. A lot of people come to Northfield because of our special education. So thank you for that. So do you find that with early intervention, the students will graduate from special education needs? So if they're identified at 3 years old, are they moving out of the programming by whatever, mid-elementary school, or how does that work?
That's certainly our hope, right? Early intervention. And I will say also our early childhood special education percentages at our Northfield Community Education Center are a little bit higher. They're in the 30s typically, and because we're trying to identify those students a little bit earlier and provide that early intervention. There are some students who will require special education services for the entirety of their educational programming. So if they're not graduating necessarily or meeting their goals and not demonstrating any needs anymore, we hope to minimize the amount of services and minimize. I always say our job is to work ourselves out of a job in special ed. Our job is to give kids the skills and the strategies that they need to be able to successfully be independent without our services. Some students can do that very successfully by the time they leave us. Other students still require a little bit of support, but we hope to increase their independence with the services that we provide.
How many homebound and home-based students do we have?
Right now, we don't have any home-based, and that's a school placement versus a child who is unable to physically enter the building due to a medical or other condition. And I would say we have. Actually, I don't know that we have any homebound right now. We do have some students who are homeschooled that we provide special education services to, but right now, and the homebound is kind of a revolving door based on current medical conditions of some of our students or some other needs. But right now, we don't have any homebound, but that kind of comes and goes throughout the year.
And just because you're here talking to us, I want to give a shout out to the Cannon Valley Special Education Cooperative, because that program is such a tremendous opportunity for the kids who need it. And I've been so impressed, having been associated with that program, that they really do serve the Tier 4 students who have the biggest challenges. And it's great that we can provide that to our students.
Yeah, and just to add to that a little bit, Amy, if you don't mind, I think we really do a nice job in Northfield too of getting kids to a point with our partnership with Cannon Valley Special Ed Co-op to transition them back to our district when they have the skills and the self-regulation ability to be in a bigger setting again. We have successfully transitioned several students back over the last handful of years, so that's exciting. That's always our goal.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yep, thank you.
All right, Ben.
Amy, I wasn't looking at your notes, but I'll ask one of the questions because you had it written down
yeah.
there. But that was my question too. The difference between kind of the discrepancy and more science-based model. What does that look like, in practical terms? And then would we expect any change in terms of, who would be identifying as eligible for special education support in a shift to a different model?
That's a really great question. The difference between the two models would be currently the discrepancy model means there needs to be a statistical discrepancy that's identified by the special ed specific learning disabilities manual that the state has. And that is the difference between a measured cognitive ability and their academic achievement in one of 7 or 8 areas. And one or more can be a discrepancy in math, written language, reading, oral expression, listening comprehension, and I know I'm forgetting one or two. And that, like I said, that is currently the model we use. So when we are looking at a learning disability, we are administering cognitive assessments and we are administering academic assessments, and we are looking at the comparison between the two, in addition to having psychological processes that are impaired. And the response to intervention, or the scientifically research-based model, would be that as a system, we would need to identify some more specific strategies and more specific interventions, and a system of interventions that we are going to consistently implement. And while we have really good interventions right now, we're just not quite there with the expectation that we're going to do that system-wide in a very strategic manner and a consistent manner. We are using data to identify kids who need intervention, and we are using data to monitor that intervention. And as a result, sometimes of lack of progress in those interventions, we are getting referrals for special education evaluations. So we're working collaboratively with those processes, but we just don't have all of the pieces in place to use the SRBI model for eligibility. And I wouldn't be able to speak intelligently about what I would anticipate the difference in eligibility would be between numbers.
And just to clarify, those systems of interventions, are those targeted at the individual level, or are you talking about just sort of systemically? across-
Individual.
Okay, yeah, so student aid needs these types of services in terms of interventions,
Mhm.
and then depending on how that works, and that would determine eligibility.
Yeah, so I'm sorry if it's individual interventions, but we have to have a specific systemic system for it, if that makes sense.
I think so. Without
I
getting
think
too
so
far in
too.
the weeds.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Just one more question, and it's, I think if you had a magic wand and closing the cross subsidy was not on the table, we already got that wish. We cast that wish a while ago. We're still waiting. But, what would be kind of the first thing that you would use that for when you look at kind of these special education system overall in your role? Kind of what would you want to change first?
If we had more money, basically,
I
or
was
if
I know that would be your answer, I guess is what I'm saying, or at least I'm guessing that would be, obviously closing the funding gap in terms of what the state provides. But setting that aside, what would be something that you would prioritize?
That is a really great question. I am just always looking for continuous improvement in the services that we provide to kids, students as a system. How are we providing a continuum of services? And so just maybe having some more flexibility in how we do that, and then honestly, having some time to work with staff on inclusive practices and professional development around that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? Hey, Peggy.
Hi, you mentioned the co-teaching in general education as
Mhm.
a instruction method. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started a few years ago. We had we were reviewing some data at our secondary level. We had a really big shift in what we call least restrictive environment, or the amount of minutes or time in a day that students spend away from their general ed peers, is we call it LRE, least restrictive environment, and federal settings. So a federal setting, one is defined as 21% or less of a child's school day is with special ed peers away from their general ed peers, and then it just kind of goes up incrementally. Federal setting 2, federal setting 3. And when we had students shift from elementary to middle school, because of our service delivery model at the middle school, we had a significant LRE issue or federal setting issue. For example, if we had students who were receiving 20 minutes of services for a reading goal at the elementary level, and they went to the middle school with a reading goal, all of a sudden now they were receiving 50 minutes, because our service delivery model was to provide a special ed class for each goal that a child had. And so all of a sudden, we got to the secondary level and kids were receiving a lot of special education services because that was the only service delivery model we had. So a few years ago, we reviewed that data and we pulled a work group together, and we created just some different service delivery models, some co-teaching opportunities, some what we call skinnies, or maybe every other day or half of a class period. And we have really shifted that least restrictive environment issue that we had pretty significantly in just 1 year, year and a half. And so it started out foundationally with just kind of reviewing the data and saying what's causing this issue. And then Caleb Davidson and the middle school administration and the high school administration have really done a lot of work in the past few years to identify interested parties, because you got to have a good connection to make that successful and work. Alicia Veltri, our instruction inclusion coach, last year created a co-teaching handbook manual boot camp and provided some training to the staff who identified that they wanted to work together in co-teaching, and we've implemented that in literacy and math at the both some sections at both the middle school and high school to kind of expand our continuum of services. Yeah. And we do have a couple of elementary special education teachers who are doing it less formally, and we are going to help formalize some more of that in the future.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Right, item C, Policy Committee recommendations. Superintendent Hillman will present the Policy Committee's recommended updates to policies 502, 505, 513, 513.1, 513.2, 513.3, and 514. This will be an item for individual action at the November 24th board meeting.
Yeah, so the policy committee has reviewed the policies that are in your packet, made several recommendations for modifications. All of the policies that you have in front of you tonight, this is the regular cycle of the review. So we are consistently looking at policies, trying to make sure that each policy gets a formal review every 4 years. You also have the bullying prohibition policy that we look at each year. And so you'll see 502 is search of student lockers, desks, personal possessions, and student's person. Throughout all of these, we're attempting to update the purpose statement to be able to align more with a strategic plan. That's not the case in every single policy. We're able to do that. But in this case, that was the one of the items. You'll see there were some updates of some definitions. There's some other adjustments to the statements in the policy, updated pieces around who uses lockers and linking things to the student citizenship handbook. We made some clarifications and then updated legal references. So that would be under 502. 505, distribution of non-school sponsored materials. Really try to expand to this particular policy had a little bit of legacy problems around it, really focusing on print and print distribution. So updating this to include more digital distribution as well, making connections to the student citizenship handbook, obviously, and then just trying to update. We're also looking at the cross references, and sometimes those become dated. And so we're trying to make sure that those are updated so that they reflect current policy numbers and names. Sometimes over the years that hadn't always been polished, if you will. The next series of policies, 513 and the corresponding 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, and 3, really are about it's student promotion, retention, and program design. Then it includes some things around the legal age of students, early entrance to kindergarten procedures, and academic acceleration. So start with 513.3 and work backwards. That is one that we really updated to try to use more modern language. We use things like grade skipping and things like that weren't the same kinds of what we're really after. So academic acceleration could take place in a variety of different ways. There were some other clarifications and updating of the language in that policy. 513.2 really just focused on updating the purpose statement, a few clarifications and updates. The same thing with the determining the legal age of students. For example, that one really focuses on connecting with the state statute around that. And then 513, the overarching policy, really updated the cross references, purpose statement, and did some more work around guardians and caregivers as we're trying to make the language and policies consistent and inclusive. So that's that suite of 513 policies. 514, the bullying prohibition policy, updated the purpose statement. And then in addition, as you know, we are working to implement more online reporting forms. And then, of course, since few people are printing out these policies anymore, continuing, something simple like live links that if you're reading the policy, you need to make a complaint, that you're able to just go right to the complaint form from the policy. So while you think, oh, that could all get done in one time, it just takes some time to go through each of these policies. And just really want to thank our policy committee members for their diligent work as we continue to bring these forward to you on a regular basis. Again, not asking for approval this evening, but just would be happy to take any questions at this moment.
Right. Board members, any questions on any of the policies? I have a few, hopefully easy ones.
Okay.
502, a comment and then my question. I mean, I'm in my world, I'm not in a situation where I am, in charge of the safety of the whole campus and there are minors in my care. I'm getting at not understanding or feeling uncomfortable with not a definition of an administrator searching a student, um, you know, outlining, do they put their hands in the student's jacket pockets? Do they tell the student to empty out their pockets? How does that work? So I'm living in that space of, that's not something that I'm familiar with in my world. So I don't know if the committee or Dr. Hillman, if you want to talk a little bit about that. I know students still keep their First Amendment rights. And I understand that we're talking about school property, the lockers, the desk, but the personal possessions is where I'm not understanding. It's not where I live. So you can make some comments on that. And then my question is on Roman numeral 5, where in letter A, indicating that the school will inform the caregivers. And I wanted to know if the committee felt like there needed to be an explanation of when that would happen. Is it going to happen in the minutes, in the days before or after, or do we need a detail of when parents will be informed?
Yes, we did not discuss that in the policy committee, and I think that times, I would say more often than not, that conversation, I'm not going to try to characterize how that happens in each circumstance. I think that the searches of any individual student are, I'm not going to say rare, but they're not regular of the personal search. So I'm not going to try to characterize, I don't have data to tell you how often. I can certainly get some data. I can qualitative data from our administrators around that about how many of those searches do they use a year. I think there's multiple ways. I think there are times that I know for sure the parent has been notified ahead of time and the parent actually comes in, to be present during the search. I also imagine there are likely times where it's empty your pockets, right? Things like that, where the parent might be notified after. I think it could be situational, but I can get some additional information from our administrative staff about how often that happens. I perceive it to be not common, right? But also not rare. Those kinds of things. And the definition, that's a fair point in terms of, you're right, there is not a specific definition about what does that mean in those cases. We could certainly take that up with the policy committee.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. I'm not necessarily looking for data. The wording in the policy is to, lay out a consistent process for dealing with contraband and safety issues. So, I'm just trying to understand, even if we don't have a lot of instances where an administrator would need to search personal possessions, what that would look like. Do they put their hands in a jacket pocket or not? So just wanted to hear the committee's thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I think that the other piece we can bring back is there's also some case law, right, that governs the difference between, a locker and a desk, right? And for example, a student's backpack or purse, right? So there's some different differentiation based upon, does the school own it or is it something of the students? And so there is case law that really guides how we do that, asking for permission, things like that, for some of those personal possessions. But if the board would like some additional information on, we'd be happy to do that. Because again, what we're really trying to do here is when this kind of thing is in play, we want it to be clear to the people who are executing it that they are not only acting in accordance with the law, but of course, within the district policy. And you're asking for it in reverse. Can you just give us a little bit of quantitative analysis of how often does it happen? What are the typical, kinds of things that are used, the strategies, et cetera?
Well, I mean, I don't need the numbers on it. I just
Okay.
want to know, since we're laying out a process, do we need to define what that search of personal property is?
Yeah,
Um,
we can certainly take that back we can bring this back to the policy
And
committee.
how is that search conducted? It just says they're able to just search personal property, but how? So that's where I'm going with that. And then the when are parents notified?
Yep, we can come back to that with you.
Okay. And then in policy 505, under guidelines, I wanted to know if sales flyers are covered in this policy.
Mm.
And if you could let me know where, or if that's even a good question.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And what I would say is I'm reviewing the guidelines. So remember, this is for students, right? This is the student and employee distribution. So I think you're saying, let's say that, let's just,
Somebody's selling a product.
right, or have a lawn mowing service or something like that. Okay. Yeah, I don't believe that that is explicitly covered in this, but we can certainly take a look, and if that's something that the board would like us to consider adding, we can certainly do that.
If it's appropriate, yeah. Okay, yeah, Corey.
I just had an additional comment on 502. It's actually just a language update for consistency. So on 502 section 5A, we have parent guardian instead of parent caretaker. So just wanted to bring that to your attention.
And it is interesting. We've been doing quite a bit of work around parent and caregiver, trying to standard. You were on the policy committee when we decided to do that. Interestingly, we have found a handful of areas. I don't believe this is one of them. There are a handful of places where we actually we've learned we need to keep the term guardian because of the legal connotation of that about who can make a particular decision, et cetera. So I might be a caregiver, but not have the legal authority to make certain decisions. So we've been trying to standardize on caregiver, and there's been from time to time where we've been working to see, is this a place where the term guardian has more meaning than referencing, if that makes sense.
But we could add. I mean,
For sure,
we can't
absolutely.
take away.
Exactly.
That would weaken it,
Yep.
but we could add caregiver in terms of being more inclusive in that language.
And that's what we're doing throughout almost all the policies. But there are some cases where it would be inappropriate to include caregiver because they don't actually have a legal authority to make a decision that's out. It's not as often as you would think, but we actually tripped up on it in a recent policy committee meeting and said, okay, we got to pay attention to that because we have to make sure that we're reinforcing people of the ability to make decisions in certain circumstances. We are going to use caregiver every time that we can, except for those few instances when we can't.
Anyone else? Comment, question on the policies? All right, thank you. We're on to our consent agenda. As a reminder, there were some personnel items in the table file added to that consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping for separate consideration? Okay, is there a motion to approve the consent grouping? Thank you, Amy. Second? Thank you, Ben. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Right, motion passes. Item 7 is our items for individual action. We have one item, and that is a renewed or refreshed mid-year evaluation tool for the superintendent's evaluation. If I could have a motion to approve the revised mid-year superintendent's evaluation tool as presented, then we can have discussion after that. Who will move?
Move.
Who moved?
Moved.
Thank you, Corey. And then Amy second. Thank you. Is there any discussion on that revised evaluation tool, the mid-year evaluation tool? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Right, motion passes. Next is our items for information. We have an enrollment options and history report. Student Information Systems, Kristen Nessett and Director of Finance, Kristen Nessett and Dr. Hillman will provide the 25-26 enrollment options and history report.
Yeah, so while Val and Chris provided the report, I'll be presenting it here this evening. So the enrollment options history, we're showing you the summary. I'm going to show you the summary page. There's a couple of additional pages that have greater detail that were included in the table file. But I want to focus on, that we go back to 2011, 12. I'm going to really focus on just the last few years here. So we've added a couple of ways to try to take a look at the data, thanks to some feedback from some board members. But just to really be clear about what this report represents. This report represents any non-Northfield student who is open enrolling into the Northfield public school system under state law. So that includes open enrollment and non-resident agreements. When you look at the Northfield non-residents in, that is what we're talking about. People who are coming from another traditional public school district and choosing Northfield schools for our educational services. When we talk about Northfield students out, that's where the array of options expands. So this beginning portion, this component at the top where it says Northfield students out, you're seeing traditional public school districts listed there. As you go past the non-residents, you see Northfield to non-public. We are showing in this summary page, we show St. Dominic's because in the other of those 52 students, there's just not enough in one institution to be able to list them individually on this particular summary sheet. St. Dominic, obviously our local Catholic parochial school. When we say Northfield to homeschool, that means Northfield School District residents who are choosing to homeschool their students and following the procedures under state law to do so. You'll also see the final category, which is the Northfield to charter. So this is Northfield School District residents who are choosing a charter school for their students. Remember, in Minnesota, charter schools are public schools run under the charter school law. So this delineates students from other traditional public school districts enrolling in Northfield, and then Northfield School District residents who are choosing a different traditional public school district, a private school option, a homeschool option, or a charter school option. And so we've been, we're doing this enrollment study, we're doing this focus group on Northfield School District residents who are choosing a different traditional public school district. It's a partnership with St. Olaf. We're working on that for January. I actually have reports going all the way back to the late 90s. And so we really have some great history of how this has evolved over time. This is just the last little more than a decade. So if you want to take a look again, the number of Northfield residents out to another traditional public school district that dropped this year by a very small amount, 292 to 288. When we look at the non-residents in, that also dropped 489 to 480. Neither of those shock me, right? You're seeing in the districts around us, many of them are seeing declining enrollment. So it would stand to reason when there are fewer students, you'll see the raw number of those students going down. I do want to point out that, St. Dominic's, we've had a long and really productive history with St. Dominic Catholic School. And if you see, they really have had an enrollment change over the years. If you go back to 2013-14, remember they're a school that serves students in kindergarten through 8th grade. They also have some other early childhood options available as well. But this is the K-8 environment. If you go back as 2013-14, they had 151 students. And then last year they were down to 73. That was an increase over the previous year, but they really have rebounded and they are over 100 students for the first time since 2019-20. So I think that that's an important piece of people seeing that private school option and how people have selected that within the community over the years. Homeschool, you see that we are down from the high point in 2020-21, which was obviously the height of the pandemic, or at least the height of us not maybe understanding all of the aspects of the pandemic. So after that, you've seen it's ranged between, this is the largest since 2020-21, but it's between 180 and 192. We have seen several years in a row where that has grown. And I think, again, that reflects a larger trend across the state and across the country. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. When we look at the charter, one of the interesting pieces is this is an area that we saw a significant decline in. And so we saw 22 fewer students, 22 fewer students last year to this year. But the local two charter schools that we authorized really remained very similar to what the number of Northfield residents who participated there last year. Where we really saw the difference, it was there was one specific online charter school that we saw a drop of 5 students. And then frankly, it's a number of other smaller school choices that come together to show that decline of around 22 students from last year to this year. So we are starting to do some different, we're adding some data to the bottom of this report. So what you'll see is we see this total students in, the total students out, the net is what you're seeing there. And then we've added the October 1st enrollment, and then you can see the students in as a percent of enrollment. Now, there's a few statistical pieces here. This is just taking the total students in, dividing it by the total number of students in our October 1 date to give you a percentage. And then it's the same thing for the students out. Now, again, those students aren't counted as part of our October 1 enrollment, but it's just to give you an idea of what percentage of of the current student count are enrolling elsewhere. And so you see that percentage, and then you see the net as of 10/1. And what I would say to you is interesting if you look over the course of the last several years, the average is around 10. I think it's the last 5 years that I did it. The average was around 10.8, and we're at 10.91 negative net out or negative net as we go into this October 1st deadline. So again, we're trying to create some context around that data. It does actually, if you look at it, it's reasonably stable, right? You know, over the last 5 or so years. We're going back quite some time, but we really think that the data is even more relevant post-pandemic, right? So when we look at that 2020, 21 year and beyond, I would even argue probably starting at the 2021, 22 year is probably the most relevant. Each year that we got away from the pandemic start, you know, I think that data becomes more reliable as probably our current reality, right? There was some, it was a little bit, I think it would be difficult to make some assumptions based on the data up until the last couple of years. Now we're starting to see the post-pandemic trends. So as you know, enrollment is something that is very significant. Our funding is based on the number of students that we have each year. We know that overall births are declining. We also know that the housing is an issue within Northfield, but we can only be talking about those things for so long that we don't have control over. And so again, what we're trying to do this year, as you saw, one of my annual goals is to really look at enrollment in terms of an enrollment study. It includes a number of pieces. We're looking at doing a partnership with a vendor called Teamworks to help us do a little bit deeper dive into this particular data. We have the enrollment focus group piece that we're going to be doing with St. Olaf. I just talked with the professor, met with her a couple of weeks ago, and I have given her quite a bit of this enrollment. And then we're going to be specifically targeting, again, those students who are living within Northfield School District who are choosing another traditional public school right now. That's the area that we're going to look at. And we're going to be doing some very simple pieces about, you know, why did you choose a different school option other than the Northfield School District? And then what would it take for you to return to the Northfield School District? So we think those two open-ended questions would really give us some great understanding about what are the things where people, there's a lot of things I perceive a number of different pieces there, but it's going to be good to try to quantify that qualitative experience of our residents who are choosing something else. So this is something that I look forward to seeing each year because I think it really gives us some great data about enrollment and really at a detailed level. So I can't give you reasons right now for why do these students choose this school or that. I can't give you some of those specific pieces, but I can talk in some generalities about the enrollment options report.
Thank you. Board members, do you have any questions at this time? Okay, Amy.
Thank you for putting all that together to show us how the numbers are all relating over the years. I think it would be really interesting to look at the Faribault in students. We have 303 this year, and questions I would be curious about is when are they coming into Northfield? Is it kindergarten? Is it in middle school? Is it high school? Is it certain? Get a sense of what's attracting them to Northfield. I'd also be interested in a geographic sense. Is it only students who live north of Faribault, like maybe in Near Strand? Once they're done with the Near Strand Elementary School, are they all jumping to the high school here instead of heading down to Faribault? I think there would be a lot of interesting information to understand why we're attracting such a large number of people from Faribault to the school district.
We used to have a tool that this was not the primary. I'm trying to remember the name, but we used to have a tool that we used that allowed us to map where students lived, right? And so we could take a look at, chart on a map where the students who lived in the Faribault zip code. We no longer have access to that tool. But I think that we would be able to use some mapping tools to try to be able to determine that. So if that is something that the board is interested in, we can certainly do some deeper dive into that. And I think we'll have to go back. I think that I would agree with you, determining the entry point of the grade level would be really interesting. And I think on the surface, I think that'd be a fairly straightforward piece to collect. That one might require a little bit more digging because it would mean going back through when did people come what grade level. So I think we can do that. It might be a little trickier than what it sounds like when you say it out loud.
Jeff?
To echo Amy's comments about Faribault, I think for a long time that 300 number's been pretty consistent, which surprises me and makes me wonder. I mean, that's a different set of kids that are going through the system continually, but it's still the number seems consistent. So it's kind of like an in and out number. And then on the flip side, I would like to see Faribault to do as well as they can. Obviously, open enrollment is their option. So, I mean, I want to be respectful of the Faribault School District, and I hope that they can do as well as they can to retain their people. But I also want to leave the option open for open enrollment, obviously.
Yeah, and Jeff, I appreciate that. The open enrollment, of course, open enrollment is state law, so people, districts can choose to close open enrollment under some specific circumstances. What you'll typically see is it's at a particular school, at a particular grade level. That's probably what I have seen most often. I'm sure there's more to it than that. But typically you'll see a board will say, we're closing open enrollment at grade 3 at this building, because the capacity has been reached. But I think, of course, trying to make sure that we're attractive. And we certainly aren't a competitive game, right? Minnesota has in my opinion, Minnesota has one of the most sophisticated systems of public school choice in the country. And so, two things can be true at the same time. We wish our neighbors well and want them to do well. We also want to put a product that people want and are willing to drive their students here for those two as well.
All right, Ben.
Yeah, just piggyback off that comment, and thanks for putting those percentages in there in terms of kind of the historical data. I think that just helps kind of have a denominator comparison. I think one of the things that stands out to me, and I think it is sort of a reflection of just people have a choice, right? And they go where they feel like they've got the best option. When we look at the percentage of students out, we're actually, kind of at a high water mark relative to the years past. We're also at a high water mark in the percentage of the students in. So that net difference is sort of keeping with the average. But obviously people are making choices about where they want to be, not necessarily even based on where they live. So that's useful to know and think about, especially as you go into those conversations with the St. Olaf team. I think understanding the why behind that is going to be really important. Thank you. I'm glad that we're working on that.
Okay, Amy.
Well, I was just looking at some of the details of all of the students out, which is in the document that you included in the packet. And it makes me wonder, and I'm sure this is something you'll find as you dig further, but whether these are like divorced families where the student somehow maintains residency here, but is living with the other parent, and so therefore has open enroll in the other school district. And just to understand that situation better, because it seems if they're living with the other parent, why would they be maintaining residency here? And it just confuses things. So again, another question, I don't know how you'd shake that out, but trying to find out whether that's just a bookkeeping error of sorts or a record keeping error, that they really should be considered a student in the other school district, or whether they go back and forth every year and they just maintain residency in one of the school districts, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think what Amy's referring to is the detail sheet, that sometimes you'll see, one student attending a district that, geographically has a significant difference. And you say, well, how can that be? And I think that you're on the right track there, Amy, with what you're thinking, and that I think it can be a variety of things. I wouldn't say it's a record keeping error because at the moment it's where their residence is. Now, what will happen from time to time is a student may still have a residence within the community, but in order to be able to attend, let's say that they are planning to move. And so the families are planning to move. They are getting closer to that location, and they enroll the students. I've seen people who have driven their kids a long way each day, while they're waiting for housing to open up. Or you may have a student who their residence is here, but they may be living with a relative in another community for a variety of different reasons, which sometimes is really just not relevant. It's an individual piece, but technically the residence is here, and they're attending somewhere else with either living with another family or something like that. I think really our focus group is going to be on some of those that are a larger chunk of numbers within a good geographic area. I think you're right. We'll filter through of those that are the one-offs, the 1, 2, 3s, et cetera. Because many times if it's 3, it's probably an entire family, right? Of, multiple siblings who are attending elsewhere. So I think to best use our time with the focus group team from St. Olaf, we're going to really try to focus on the larger chunks of families. We can't, of course, make people come into focus groups, but we're going to do the best that we can to recruit and have people come in and just share those experiences with us. So it is about, you're right, there's some interesting, one-offs, if you will. And there's probably there's as many, if not more stories, right, than there are students in those particular cases. But I think for the purpose of our enrollment study, what are the places where we actually have a real chance to bring students back, if that makes sense?
Anyone else? Question or comment? Okay, thank you for that report. Okay, we're on item C, construction update number 18. Would you like to make some comments on that report, Dr. Hellman?
I will allow the report to stand. There's not been significant changes since last month.
Are
Can I-
there any
can I point
questions
out-
on that report for anyone?
I did want to point out, we also had this month's enrollment report.
Yeah, was
And that was in the
Did I-
table file tonight. So just, I want to point out, you were talking enrollment options, and then you had this month's enrollment report. So just want to call that
No,
out.
I see that. I apologize. So
Nope, no
we're on
issue.
item B, enrollment report. Did you want to make some comments on that?
I think that what I'd like to do is, I'm just making sure I've got that particular copy. And yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and I've committed to bringing this document up. That's the wrong one. There we go. So specifically this one, what I've committed to is showing you on a monthly basis specifically. We are still 11 above projection this month, which is good. We've been as low as 6 behind projection, as high as 18 above projection. But when we start to hit November, we hopefully start to hit that kind of cruising altitude. It's not uncommon to see, that change throughout the year, but we are 11 above projection in November. And then I'm committed just to showing this particular page, which shows the various class sizes at the elementary school. So this is just this particular monthly report. So certainly would take any questions that people have about this. I mean, I think we did more with the enrollment options report tonight, but this is the regular monthly enrollment report. So happy to answer any questions about that as well.
Any questions or comments on this month's enrollment report? Thank you for sharing that. And then we're going to let the construction update report stand. And then item D is our American Education Week is next week, November 17th through the 21st. This is American Education Week presents all Americans with the opportunity to celebrate public education and honor individuals for making a difference in ensuring that every child receives a quality education. Northfield Public Schools recognizes and appreciates the team of people who work each day to prepare every student for lifelong success by developing critical thinkers who are curious and ready to engage in our society during this week-long celebration of public education. Item 9 is our future meetings. We have a regular board meeting Monday, November 24, and Monday, December 8. And then Monday, January 12th is our organizational meeting at 6 p.m., immediately followed by a regular meeting of the calendar year. All of those take place in the same boardroom. That is all the business that we have for this meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Jenny. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Opposed? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.